Thank you. We continue traveling through the land of Israel, and we find ourselves in this special about the evidence of the birth of Jesus. In our previous episodes, we were in the city of Nazareth, at the place where the angels announced the birth of Jesus to the shepherds. And we were also at the place where Jesus was born, in the city of Bethlehem. As we continue with the biblical chronology, today we are at one of the sites that belonged to King Herod, the one who ruled at the time of Jesus' birth. Throughout the region of Judea and in the city of Jerusalem, he also selected several sites. He created and built several places. One of them was eventually going to be the place where he would find his burial site, where he would finally be buried. Today we are going to visit this site in the territories of Judea called Herodion.
Thank you. Thank you.
After climbing these steps in the picture, I think the staircase looks really nice. It looks really beautiful. You might wonder, how would I like climbing those stairs? But I can assure you that when you start climbing them, that phrase would turn into, why did I climb these stairs? Because they're quite high. As for the number of stairways there are, I don't know exactly how many stairs there are. Why don't we count them? But they say there are about 500 steps, so we had to climb about 500 steps to get to this place. This place is where we are now. Look, these are wooden stairs. Below, the stone stairs continue. Now later, when we start and keep going up further, we will find the original stones from ancient times, that is, from the time when they built and constructed this place. In fact, if you paid attention when we were coming up the stairs, you saw some rocks like they're stuck together. Why? Because they're not the original rocks. I mean, they're not this type of stacked rocks, but rather what happened, possibly according to archaeology, is that they wanted to block this entrance. They wanted to seal this entrance. As I mentioned earlier, the archaeologist, the one who was working in this place and was not building, but was here with his whole team from the Hebrew University. They were working on all the archaeological work. They came to the conclusion that this site, as one of the fortresses, one of the main fortresses that Herodes built in the territory of Judea, was intended as a summer fortress. Another place where he could come to spend the summer, to invite his friends, as we also saw in one of the previous images. This kind of amphitheater, like a mini amphitheater, closely resembles the large amphitheater found in the city of Caesarea Maritima. The larger event accommodates around 15,000 people, while the smaller one is for just 300, despite having the same concept. Because when people came to visit this place, they could enjoy some time in the private theater of Herod's palace, known as Herodion, the place where we are now. Obviously, the people who came here were very carefully selected by Herod and his entire team. It wasn't like, I'm going to Herod's palace to see the theater, or I'm going to buy a ticket to see the theater. No, because they could also enter the private section, which was a private room. And as we said at one point too, that was the place where Marco Aurelio finally came and visited, who was the second person in the leadership of all of Rome. Now, what I want to do with you is read the biblical account that we have in the scriptures. Although the Jewish historian Flavio Josepho gives a lot of details in his book about this place. In fact, archaeologists, in order to search this site, relied heavily on the writings of Flavio Josepho. But let's read in the book of Matthew chapter 2 to try to take us to an event that happened. We are once again, and I repeat, looking at evidence of the birth of Jesus, which is what happened in those days 2,000 years ago. Let's see what Matthew chapter 2 tells us. When Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of King Herod, wise men came from the east to Jerusalem, saying, "Where is the King of the Jews who has been born? For we have seen his star in the east and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And when he had gathered all the chief priests and scribes of the people together, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. They said to him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it is written by the prophet, and you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means the least among the rulers of Judah. Out of you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel, my people Israel." Then Herodes, calling the wise men secretly, inquired of them diligently about the time the star appeared. And sending them to Bethlehem, he said, "Go there and search diligently for the child, and when you find him, let me know, so that I may also go and worship him." Having heard the king, they went their way, and behold, the star which they had seen in the east went before them, until it came and stood over where the child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced with immense joy. Upon entering the house, they saw the child with his mother, Maria. They fell down and worshipped him, offering gifts from their treasures, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. But, being warned by revelation in a dream not to return to Herod, they went back to their country by another way. After they had departed, an angel of the Lord appeared to Jose in a dream and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother, and flee to Egypt, and stay there until I tell you. For it will happen that Herod will seek the child to kill him, and he, waking up, took the child and his mother by night and went to Egypt. And he stayed there until the death of Herod, so that what the Lord said through the prophet would be fulfilled, when he said, 'Out of Egypt I called my son.' Then Herod, when he realized he had been deceived by the wise men, became very angry and ordered the killing of all the children under 2 years old who were in Bethlehem and all its surroundings, according to the time he had learned from the wise men. Then what was spoken by the prophet Jeremiah was fulfilled, saying, 'A voice was heard in Ramah, great lamentation, weeping and wailing, Rachel weeping for her children, and she refused to be comforted because they were gone.' But after Herod's death, an angel of the Lord appeared. He appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt, saying, 'Get up, take the child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel, for those who sought the child's life are dead.'" It was long, I know, but why did I want to read this to you first? Because I think we rarely get to read this. Exactly in the place where this king sent to kill the Messiah. And we're actually reading this in the very place where that same king was buried. The angels, when they came and gave the announcement, not only to the wise men, but they also warned them on the way. Don't go because Herodes is plotting something. He also told Jose that when he tells him, leave because Herodes is plotting something. and only return to the land of Israel when Herodes has died. Now I want us to pay attention to something here because we are in one of the fortresses, the palace of King Herodes. It is said and heard that he himself ordered to be built for his death. That is, when he died, he would be buried there. We know that he died a slow death. He was one of the kings, most ambitious that the territory of Judea had 2,000 years ago. All of this relates to and can be observed in modern archaeological work about the buildings and constructions that this ambitious man created and built in the past. Now, what I specifically want to say with this is that it's not that he created this palace according to archaeology as his tomb, but rather that he created this palace as just another palace. As we said earlier, as a summer place where he could come to spend the summer and bring his friends. Archaeologists concluded that this place ultimately became his burial site, but the events leading to this remain unclear. Because if we look from an aerial view, we're going to see it from afar. We see something like a volcano. This structure is kind of like a volcano built around, and it looks like a circle from above. It's not natural. In other words, it's not just another hill in the Judea area, but rather a kind of man-made mound. And why is it a kind of man-made mound? Because Herodes knew that his last day was coming. He knew he was close to death, he had fallen ill, and he knew his days were numbered. So he chose one of his palaces, specifically the palace that bore his name, Herodion. He selected that palace and said, "I want to be buried there." Not very far from the city of Jerusalem, not very far from the territory of Bethlehem. When they finally buried him, what they did was not only bury his body and cover him, but they also covered the palace. That's why today we see this kind of mountain, this sort of man-made hill. In other words, what he wanted was not only to be buried himself, but for all his ambition to be buried with him. That is, his entire palace as well to be buried with him. It wasn't until 2010, as we said, that much more could be discovered about this place. Finally, this sarcophagus was found, where he was buried in recent years. We're going to keep exploring this place, but before we go further up the stairs, I want to say something. I want to show you what my eyes are seeing. Because from here, he could probably stand in this spot and see the whole picture of what his empire had achieved. I want you to look at this, see what he could see. Like I said, these rocks here on the side look like they've been cut. Why? Because this was buried again, and everything was
Closed off. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
As we continue exploring this place, now we're going up these stairs because today we can discover. And obviously what we're seeing here is something incredible. If we look at this, it's actually not from ancient times, but rather it's restored. As you can see here up close, all of this is restored and created, trying to bring it back to that ancient era.
Why?
Because of this column. What it's showing us is that finally, this is where Herodias was buried. More precisely, in this place we're about to see here. Here, underneath. Underneath this structure is the burial place of Herodias. There are some kinds of caves, and through those caves, you can get there. We right now can't try, and we can't go in through that place because this place ended up being closed in 2010 when one of the archaeologists who had been investigating for more than 35 years, the man who was searching for the place where Herodias was finally buried, he had a fall after a collapse and passed away. And he died very close, just meters away from almost having found the heir tomb of Herodias. It's incredible that even in the search for his tomb, people kept dying.
Afterwards.
Also, behind this man named Herodias, everyone who was around at that time and everyone who surrounded Herodias' life, the life of this character, he was classified as one of the greatest tyrants in all of history, and in fact, one of the most incredible tyrants in the history of Israel. In the area of the territory of Judea, specifically, there are some who say that it was even better to be one of his pigs than to be one of his sons. That is to say, he was an extremely bad person, extremely aggressive. Here, as we can see in this image, it shows us what was found. Finally, the sarcophagus, where the tomb of Herodias was finally found. And why is this place considered to be the one? Because it is precisely one of the fortresses that he ordered to be built. He built the fortress of Masada, the fortress of Caesarea, the city of Caesarea, rather the temple of the city of Jerusalem, and the fortress in Jericho dedicated to Cleopatra. And many, many other sites. He was the greatest builder or constructor that ever existed in the territory of Israel. Obviously, the Jews never got along with him, even though he had built or allowed them to build the Second Temple of Jerusalem. Even though he did that, they still didn't get along with him, with Herodias the Great. From here, let's keep going. A little bit more. This complex, known as Herodion, In 40 before Christ, Herodias was forced to flee Jerusalem because Antigonus Mattathias, the last of the Hasmonean kings, had entered into an alliance with the Parthians against the Romans, who would actually become the sponsors of Herodias so that he could be crowned king. The Parthians had blocked the Romans' access from the east, and at that time, they also controlled the entire region of Syria, which included Jerusalem as well. Antigonus was appointed ruler of Judah, and that's why Herodias was eventually forced to flee from Jerusalem. Antigonus and his allies chased him down and caught up to him near eastern Bethlehem. However, Herodias escaped with great difficulty. Leaving his family behind, he set out for Rome, where the Romans would eventually officially appoint him king of Judah. Herodes returned to Judah, defeated Antigonus Mattathias, and became the absolute king of the entire area. Around 28 before Christ, he began to build Herodion. The entire administration of the Beit Sahor district was moved to Herodion, and water was brought to this place. From Solomon's pools in the city of Jerusalem, the water traveled approximately a distance of about 6 kilometers. According to Flavius Josephus, a tomb had already been created at this site so that when the king died, that would be his resting place. During the Great Revolt of Jerusalem, 66 years after Christ, the Jewish rebellion to recover the temple managed to take control of Herodion, and they were entrenched there for about 6 months after the destruction of the temple. The Romans finally set out to capture the peripheral areas of Judea from the Zealots, and apparently due to its proximity to the city of Jerusalem, Herodion was the first target. According to Flavius Josephus, the Jewish historian, during the Bar Kokhba revolt in 132 to 135 after Jesus, Mount Herod also served as a base for the rebels who left behind, among other things, secret tunnels and caves carved into the rock. The Byzantine period between the 4th and 7th centuries. A large village with 3 churches was built in the lower area of the palace, and a chapel was built on top of the mountain. I think today we were able to learn a lot and explore this whole place. Honestly, it's incredible what the human mind can create. As we walked through this place, we started to wonder how many lives might have even met their end here. And we only remember the death of one, but surely many more died in this area, and they didn't just die because of the construction, because they were building here. Lifting one of these stones, bringing a stone like this to this place was, of course, dangerous. And maybe many found their last day beneath these rocks. But not only that, but a few years later, after the death of Herodes the Great, there was what is known as the Herodian dynasty. Several Herodes succeeded him. But it wasn't until the year 135. It seems like what is known as the Jewish revolt to try to recover the city of Jerusalem again. After in the year 73, approximately after the birth of Jesus, it was destroyed precisely because of a conflict with the Romans. From here, we are going to continue following the evidence of the birth of Jesus, and we will keep moving forward in the chronology. Regarding the growth and age of Jesus, why do I mention the growth and age of Jesus? We have a case in the scriptures that tells us that when he was approximately a teenager, he was an adolescent. He was in the area of the city of Jerusalem, and his parents were returning again to the area of Nazareth. And they had forgotten their son. How incredible, right? They had forgotten their son. The distance between Jerusalem and Nazareth is roughly 200 kilometers. Forgetting their child today. How many parents nowadays forget their children in car seats in the middle of summer? In the past, they would forget their child on the way. Jesus was surely a bit mischievous too, so if your child is mischievous and runs off on the way, And he goes off to play with the other kids in soccer or with the little lambs and the puppy? Surely the parents were walking ahead and Jesus was behind playing. But that wasn't the case on this trip. On this trip, Jesus had stayed behind in Jerusalem. When they finally found him, he said, "I must be about my Father's business." A message that Mary and Joseph perhaps didn't fully understand the depth of what Jesus had said to his parents at that moment. We will continue in our next episode on the steps where those words were spoken in the city of Jerusalem near the temple. So don't miss our next episode of the evidence of the birth of Jesus from here, from the land of Israel.
Thank you.